as we've seen these hurricanes and other disasters, we're starting to see more and more that people are out there putting out false information, telling the story.
Craig, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to start just by having you introduce yourself and your lengthy experience with natural disasters and emergency management.
My name is Craig Fugate. I served as the FEMA Administrator in the Obama administration. Prior to that, I served Florida's Director of Emergency Management under Governor Bush and Governor Chris.
You've seen a lot of hurricanes.
Yeah, in 2004, we were hit 4 times by hurricanes. At FEMA, we dealt with Superstorm Sandy. In my career, we've seen a lot of hurricanes.
There's been a lot of misinformation and misconception around FEMA and its role. Can you walk us through what that agency does?
Yeah, FEMA is in support of the governors. I think there's a tendency when we think about responding to disasters, FEMA's almost become a verb to represent response. But FEMA doesn't do that. They support the governors primarily at the governor's request of sending in resources, in some cases specialized teams like urban search and rescue teams. And there's this tendency to think, well, if I don't see FEMA on day one, they're not helping. Well, they're helping at the State Emergency Operations Center. They're helping getting supplies in. They're coordinating other federal agencies that are supporting the governor. And really, you don't see FEMA on the ground until the situation is stable and you're starting to begin the recovery process. And then you'll start seeing FEMA in the field as they're working to get people registered for assistance.
And another kind of confusion and misconception is around the funding and how FEMA is funded. Can you walk us through how that works?
Yeah, this is, I think, something you hear a lot of discussion about, but FEMA has a separate fund that is established by Congress that's called the Disaster Relief Fund. And that is the fund that is used to pay for disasters. It cannot pay for anything else. It's actually illegal to use that money in other programs. And those funds are used not only to do the initial response, but also pay for the cost of rebuilding after disasters. And so there's been a lot of concern that because FEMA had indicated that they're going to need additional funding, that was really referring to the long-term recovery cost of rebuilding from hurricanes that occurred years ago. But FEMA also manages the Disaster Relief Fund to ensure they have funds to respond to the immediate impacts of disaster. So it won't affect the response support to the governors. It won't affect the initial assistance that people get from FEMA. Where it does become an impact is longer term doing permanent work. And the way I describe that is if you have a fire station that gets destroyed in a storm, FEMA will pay and help you put in a temporary fire station. That's all being funded. But when you go to rebuild that fire station, that's money that FEMA may need additional allocations from Congress. And until they get that allocation, you may not be able to do the permanent replacement of that fire station.
Right, because recovery, it's a long-term process. Tell us about what happens when the cameras leave. And is that when FEMA's work begins?
Well, that's really, I think, once the initial rescues are done and the media now goes to the next crisis, FEMA's still there. And they will be there for years, if not a decade or more. There are still people working in Puerto Rico on Hurricane Maria. There are still people in Florida that were working on past hurricanes that had struck the state of Florida. So FEMA's teams, they don't leave when the cameras leave. And the crux of a lot of the things that people think about FEMA are things they'll never see unless they are directly working with FEMA in the rebuilding of those communities.
Talk to me a little bit about your role. I know you played a role in implementing digital media in emergency management. Since you've been there, what has shifted in terms of online resources, but also the online information ecosystem, which is feeling this time around particularly chaotic?
Yeah, I mean, when we first started this, it was rather novel, but people were using it. And I felt that we should be able to communicate with people with the tools they're using. And there wasn't a lot of, what we saw people that were directly trying to disrupt the communications. But by the time we got to Superstorm Sandy, we started seeing proliferation of rumors that would get started on social media. And that was the first time, we really began focusing on, with our digital media strategies of monitoring information that was not correct and trying to get correct information out there. And again, this was not about deflecting criticism. If they wanted to criticize FEMA, it was like, fair, go ahead. But if it was misinformation that was slowing down or perhaps would keep people from getting help they needed, we felt we should correct that and provide a factual answer. But as we've seen these hurricanes and other disasters, we're starting to see more and more that people are out there putting out false information, telling the story. And it isn't so much they're putting out the false information, is they're trying to get their viewership up, or they're trying to be the story and take away from the people that actually lost their homes and families. I don't know if you're going to stop it. I think we're aware of it, but it's a lot of the stuff is not about the people that got impacted. It's about people wanting to make themselves seem important, say stuff that's just outlandish, trying to get clicks and attention that has nothing to do with getting information to the public. And it's unfortunate they're out there, but I guess that's some of the aspects of human nature that we still have to deal with.
For those who are in a mandatory evacuation zone, who perhaps are only relying on social media, what is your advice to them?
You need to go to your local officials and the official forecast from the National Weather Service and the National Hurricane Center. I'm seeing a lot of information out there, a lot of people putting out their own weather forecast. And again, you need to pay attention and listen to your local officials and the official forecast from the National Weather Service, which the National Hurricane Center is part of. And that's not really changed even with the advent of social media. We've always told people the best information is coming from your local officials. And in many ways, while social media has taken off, sometimes, the TV broadcast, the radio broadcast of those local officials are still the best sources of information. And then after this storm hits, social media is a non-issue for the people in the area because they don't even have connectivity. So if you think about all the social media up in Helene in the mountains, most of those people couldn't even get internet. That was playing to an audience that wasn't even in the area of impact. So we're back to using things like AM and FM radio to get critical information to those areas. And as they get connectivity back, they'll start running into their social media. But in the beginning, there's very little useful information getting to them other than by radio.